All right. Welcome, everybody. Another edition of the Beck Bode NoBondsCast. My name is Ben Beck. I'm here with Jim Bode, my co-managing partner at Beck Bode. And we have the pleasure of introducing to some of you, but many of you that are watching, I'm sure already know who Meg Curry is. Meg Curry is our Director of Financial Planning here at Beck Bode. She's one of the longest standing members at Beck Bode.
Yeah.
Going back to probably like 2014, 15, right in there.
18.
Oh, it was 18.
7 years.
7. Oh, wow. Interesting. I thought it was a lot longer than that, Meg, but it's, well, regardless, it's been, I'll have to say, just an incredible experience having somebody of Meg's caliber and experience on board with us at Beck Bode. Meg, you've not only witnessed, but been a big driver of our growth as a firm. So I know I can speak for Jim when we say we thank you for that, all of your experience and all of your input. Just like today, I know we're here to talk about the 3 stages of retirement planning. And, when I think of retirement planning, I think of really the fundamental question that I think, while it might not be spoken, but it's always on somebody's mind, as a client or a prospective client or just as an investor, is will I outlive my money or will my money outlive me? And lucky for all of you watching today, Meg's going to cover 3 parts of the retirement process. Before we get there, though, Meg's got a pretty interesting background that I'd love to allow her to share a bit about, if you don't mind, Meg.
Okay. Well, thank you. So I actually started in high tech. My bachelor's degree is in computer science. PCs were being introduced while I was at BU. And so I ended up going more of a PC support type of role, but eventually I ended up moving over to Wealthy Communications, which no longer exists, but was Cisco's competitor. And I ultimately became a software quality engineer. Got let go during the high-tech bubble burst, and then after a few years realized I needed to make a change. So I decided to go into financial planning. Along the way, I discovered I had a very strong tax head, supported with the financial planning. I've done seasonal tax work at a couple of different local regional tax firms. I got impacted by stock options myself, so I just have that strong tax head. And then I landed here 7 years ago.
Yeah. And it's always, I know Jim and I talk about this a lot. It's always interesting when, we get to work with folks like yourself that, I've been in finance my whole life. Jim's essentially been in finance his whole life. You have the experience of coming from, well, as you mentioned, the high tech world, and at a time, right, when you were involved in a really big boom, so to speak, right? And the subsequent bust, the bubble bursting in the 2000s, which I think that lends itself. I'm sure the experience wasn't great personally for you to go through at that time, but it certainly lends itself well, in my opinion, to the financial planning process. You've lived through and understand what it's like to go through periods of time like that. We talk on this podcast, Jim and I talk about how frequent we see these downturns, yet how temporary they turn out to be, most of them at least. And it's great to sit in a meeting with you, Meg, and talk with clients collectively with you, and to be able to share that experience as well as the tax side and so on and so forth. So it's great to have you aboard.
Thank you.
Yeah, and with Meg on board, and not just 7 years with us, but with her experience in the industry, I mean, the financial planning process has changed tremendously. I remember when Ben and I first started working together, we would put together a plan, kind of check it off the box, and print out all these documents, and would sit on a shelf and would be done with it, and not necessarily revisit it or lean on it as much as we do now at this stage in our business. And we get the question a lot from people is it too early to start putting a plan together? Or on the other side of it is it too late to actually put a plan together? And the reality is It's never too early and it's never too late. But for today, we're going to start at the beginning. We're going to start at looking at those early career foundation, those things we can do from the beginning. And Meg, love to hear what we can do, what kind of your mindset is when you're looking at someone that's earlier in the career and looking at starting to put together a plan and some of the things that we want to address.
The one big thing I would say is starting early is huge. And even if it's just a little bit, every little bit counts. When you're first out of school, you're oftentimes thinking, well, you know, I have to get a car, I have to set up an apartment, I have to do this, and I want to live life. And I'm not saying that, no, you shouldn't live life, but always put something away. Do some savings. At a minimum, try to get to contribute to your 401k or 403b, your employer sponsored plan. Get enough to get the match. Even if the company doesn't do a match, put something away because it's for yourself. So it really is beneficial. We actually have a chart that I don't know if HR people do this anymore, but I know when I was starting out, they oftentimes said, if a 25-year-old put away X for X amount of time versus a 35-year-old, it's powerful, the power of time. So I was going to say, if we want to show the chart now, this is a chart that shows that a 25-year-old puts $7,000 away for 10 years. That's that little black line or dark blue line that you see. And then the 35-year-old then turns around and puts it away for 10 years. So they've both put away $70,000. But at age 65, you can see that the 25-year-old has almost $250,000 more. My assumption here is roughly a 6% growth rate. The 7,000 contribution, that happens to be what an IRA contribution is this year. So this is the power of time. And one of the notes I've jotted for myself is Einstein said, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. And this chart clearly shows that.
Yeah, it's incredible. You know, we do this every day, right, Meg? We talk about these concepts, and certainly whether it's Einstein's comment or was it Warren Buffett, I think, or maybe his partner, the late Charlie Munger, had said, not to interrupt compounding unnecessarily. You know, that's the power right there. And really, particularly for folks that are younger, you said it right from the beginning of your comments, Meg, is that how incredibly impactful the length of time that you have, like the runway, right? Yeah. Yeah. Incredible.
And it's starting those habits young. I mean, we actually have to create habits. And I know when I graduated college, and maybe the same for the two of you and anybody listening, it's like, holy cow, I got my paycheck. I'm going to go out there and spend it on something. But literally looking at these numbers and really thinking about starting early, creating good habits early with putting money away and paying yourself first, and those little things like matches. Obviously, looking at this chart, it adds up over time. And the best thing any of us can do is create good saving habits as early as possible.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So you've got younger, we're talking about the younger clients, but now if we move into a little bit further, I guess chronologically down the runway here, and we get into, say, the married couples with children, like what are some strategies and recommendations that you can talk about at that phase of the lifetime?
So with married couples, oftentimes the mother, I'm not being sexist, but oftentimes the mother will stay at home to raise the children. Well, she doesn't have an income, so she's thinking she can't contribute to any kind of retirement account. But the spouse, they can use their earnings to make what's considered a spousal IRA contribution. And there's no concept of an IRA that's called spousal. It's just that you're a married couple, you use your spouse's earnings to put away. And that too can be huge because, the partner who is not working probably already does have something. And this is a way to at least put a little bit more away. And just have it continue to grow, and it can benefit the couple if you're doing pre-retirement because it's going to help reduce your taxes, which of course is the one thing that no one ever wants to pay.
Right.
But always continuing to put away is huge. I mean, I hate to say it, but save.
Yeah, and it's save, 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 and it's plan, plan, plan too, right? I
Right,
mean, at that stage of life, when you're at your maximum earnings, a lot of people are starting to think about potentially college and
right,
I mean, I'm going through this personally right now with my kids. Is my oldest son now is going to college next year and paying for that, or potentially a second home. That is all events in our lives that we can actually plan for. So it's not just save, it's like being very specific with how do we want to save, where do we want to save. You want to share a little bit of some strategies around that or thoughts that you might have around that, Meg, is saving for specific events?
know your timeline. It's not like, okay, I want to buy a second home next year. I have no money, but how do I do this? It's
Mhm.
like, okay, I do want to have a second home. Maybe in 5 years, we'll start saving now for the deposit, down payment, or even the first home for the early
Mhm.
mid-career person.
Mhm.
Um, just start saving early and tuck that away. And that money can't be invested because that's more short term. So you do end up having to put it away. Um, One thing that I've often come across is people say, well, I can't put money into retirement because I have to save for college. Well, guess what? You can't take a loan for retirement. So I discourage people from
Mhm.
putting money towards college savings, and not putting towards retirement, because the child can always take out a loan. You can't take it for retirement.
Right, right. That the
So it's
adage, take care of yourself first,
right,
sounds on the surface selfish, but really actually astute financial planning is that, hey, look, what you just said there is that, look, you don't want to, you can't take a loan, to fund your retirement lifestyle. You certainly can take a loan to fill in the holes or fund a good portion of college and pay that back over time.
right,
Yeah.
right. And I'm not saying, you know, okay, live like paupers. It's like
Hmm.
just reasonable, just
Hmm.
reasonably, pay attention and start putting money away, because the power of time, even for college savings, forget, saving for retirement, college savings, start early,
Hmm.
when the child is born.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, that makes me think too, at least that age group of folks, married couples, have children, or as Jim said, in where he is in his life, his first child just about to go to college, which is mind-boggling, by the way, to think about. But it's here, right? Um,
Yeah.
but something that's, and I wonder if you could touch on this briefly too, something that I find is often overlooked in the financial planning process, would be what happens to the financial plan if the husband or wife ceases to wake up tomorrow, right? Something that we don't like to talk about, in
Mhm.
social settings, but certainly it's a fact of life that bad things happen sometime. And we always want to be, as professionals, very cognizant of, well, given that there are some things, because that this age group, right? There's higher earnings typically as
right,
the years go on, but there's also the potential for higher liabilities, whether that's loans for college, whether that's the mortgage on the home,
Mhm.
and such. But so talk, can you talk briefly at least about how life insurance can fit into the scenario for a lot of people?
so life insurance is exactly what it is. And I don't know if there's as prevalent anymore, but I know in the past I've heard of somebody getting a reverse life insurance, so that
Hmm.
it's a term policy that goes down every year, and it's basically to cover the mortgage.
Right.
There's analysis that we can do that says, hey, what, this is what your expenses are. If if the breadwinner passes, what what needs to be
Hmm.
replaced, cover the mortgage, cover college expenses,
Hmm.
and therefore you save, and you get a life insurance policy for that. The flip side, which is oftentimes never considered, is like, oh, well, my wife works, she's at home, she takes care of the kids, I don't need a policy on her. Well, guess
Hmm.
what? If you have little ones at home, who's the caretaker? And all of a sudden, you're the breadwinner. You now
Hmm.
have to hire somebody to take care of the kids, and the stay-at-home partner is doing the cooking, the cleaning, the shopping, taking the
Yeah.
kids all over the place. That can add up. So don't forget that the at-home person is probably as valuable, if not maybe more valuable, to have life insurance on.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point too, or points you're making there. It's something that we don't really like to think about from a financial planning standpoint. It's necessary to make sure that the plan that we put together continues on and keeps the family in a good place, at least financially, like you said, Meg, whether that's paying off the mortgage, making sure college is paid for. And depending on how old you are, making sure those earnings to some extent are replaced for a certain amount of time. Jim and I, we talk about this often, and we find one of the holes out there in the industry in financial planning is, in fact, protecting the plan itself from an unforeseen early event like death of one of the parents. So.
Right.
We got a few minutes left here. Can we talk a little bit about a little bit more farther down the road now? So we're maybe we're in what I've heard out there called maybe the retirement red zone, or towards the end of the assumptions in terms of the working years. And I think Jim mentioned it at the beginning of the call, talking a little bit about, well, I'm too far down the line to do retirement planning and so on and so forth. Talk to me about some of the things that you see in that realm.
Um, well, taxes is always a big thing. Of course, that's because of my tax background. Um, but when somebody retires or is on the verge of retirement, there are things that we can do to sort of minimize the taxes, but you have to be prepared for it. The other aspect is, which you guys know I do an awful lot of, is people considering doing Roth conversions. But one thing I watch for is don't want to increase the tax bracket, but we certainly, if they're on Medicare, we don't want to be um, pushing them into the next bracket for IRMA, which is the income related monthly adjustment amount that your Medicare premiums are based on. So there's a sweet spot. If somebody hasn't started collecting Social Security, they can thrive on their earnings, but they are in Medicare. That's a sweet spot. Their earnings are lower, and they can possibly do a Roth conversion that passes on. If they ultimately don't need that money, that passes on a very generous gift to their heirs of tax-free income.
Mm.
Yeah, one of the things we talk a lot about with our planning as a company is inflation and the long-term effects of inflation, and how do we plan properly for inflation. And the other side of inflation is also tax planning that we can potentially do for clients. And when people are thinking about tax planning, a lot of times they're thinking just about Roth conversions. Well, what happens if we go back 2 stages to that early career and we start making Roth contributions if they have that option as a 401k? Right? And then we don't have to do conversions. So the tax planning does start early, and it really does continue all the way through that retirement transition timeline. So the inflation is a big part of planning, but so is making some really good strategic moves around the tax side of things as well. And I know that that starts early, but continues all the way through retirement.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jim, too. And not only, being cognizant of making Roth contributions when you can, but Meg touched on the company sponsored retirement plans and making sure you're contributing at least as much as the company will match, if not more. But also, what we're finding very common in company sponsored retirement plans is the Roth option on the 401k plan too, which does not have an income barrier like the Roth, or an income ceiling
Right.
like the Roth IRA does. So that's there is a debate out there, like, what's better? Should I be making more Roth contributions today, or should I be making the traditional 401k contributions? And we could fill up 3 more NoBondsCast with talking about that back and forth in that debate. But the main idea here is that is available, and it is something that you can consider in the planning process. So great points all the way around.
Right.
Any before we wrap up here, Meg, I know we're at time, and I can speak for Jim and probably everybody working. I mean, we could talk for hours about different aspects with you and your wealth of experience. anything that you would like to leave the viewers with as a thought for retirement in general?
Plan ahead.
Mm.
Mhm.
Plan ahead. I know I've said to some young folks that I've met, I said, you'll thank me when you come to retirement. I said, I'll be long gone, but you'll thank me if you start putting away now. And they just kind of looked at me, but I'm hoping that they hear me and start doing it.
Yeah.
I didn't get my first full-time job until I was 27 or 28. I've always regretted that I didn't get to start sooner, but I made the effort and it seems like it's paying off.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah, and great, very simple but very meaningful words. Plan ahead. Certainly for younger folks, but also, we talked a moment ago about that age range of, say, being in your 50s or getting close to retirement red zone, and really understanding that planning is very effective at those ages as well. Because one thing that we talk about a lot is the fact that, hey, look, the 62-year-old husband and wife retiring today, statistically speaking, one of the spouses is going to live into their 90s today. So that means for a 62-year-old, 30 plus years, 3 decades plus of income needed to support your lifestyle. And that's a long time. And that actually, on one hand, yes, it necessitates the savings, but it also necessitates the planning and the understanding that, hey, look, we have a runway here too that we need to support, and planning can be very effective in that realm as well. So,
Right.
so from early foundations to looking into the peak earning years, and then getting to that retirement transition point, all great information, all great points today, Meg and Jim. Really appreciate you coming on, Meg. I'm sure a lot of our clients that are watching that know you, they're just tickled to see you on the NoBondsCast here. And Jim and I look forward to having you on again soon.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, Meg. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll be back at you in a few weeks with another guest and some great topics to talk about. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.